I heard something and peeked into the neighbor's yard through a crack. It wasn't curiosity, just a reflex. I saw that my neighbor was barefoot, wearing a long dress pulled up to her knees so it wouldn't get dirty, surrounded by black candles that looked like they were stuck into the grass. In front of her, I saw a figure made of branches, like a small statue with something. Horns seemed to appear. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're in the best mood to listen to stories of terror, of witches, demons, and ghosts, and if not, I truly hope these stories at least keep you company. Remember that this space, this community, will be here to keep you company whenever you need it. You are listening to Relatos de la Noche. Good evening. I want to tell you something that I still find hard to admit I'm experiencing. Why are we embarrassed to admit experiencing the paranormal? It started last year when I finally moved into a little house that I was able to rent cheaply. Small, old, but it had its own yard, and for me that was already a lot. The first week, nothing strange happened. The only thing that caught my attention was my neighbor. She lived in the house next door, but she always had the curtains closed and almost never turned on the lights. She spoke to no one, barely left to take out the trash, and quickly went back inside without looking up. She wasn't unfriendly, she was just one of those people who keep to themselves. One night around 10, I went out to the yard to take out some boxes I had used for the move. When I opened the door, I heard something I couldn't identify, like a chant, but low, deep, and repetitive. I thought it was coming from a TV or a radio that was on, but when I got closer to the back of the yard, I realized it was coming from the other side of the wall, from his garden. What happened next wasn't out of curiosity, Uriel. It was a reflex. I took 2 steps and peeked through a hole in the wood. I saw that my neighbor was barefoot, wearing a long dress pulled up to her knees so it wouldn't get dirty, surrounded by black candles that looked like they were stuck into the grass. In front of her, I saw a figure made of branches, like a small statue with something that looked like horns. She had her hands extended toward that figure while she murmured something. It definitely wasn't in Spanish. And there was something else, the smell. A strong smell like a stable that you could feel inside your nose, as if there were animals locked up there, breathing right beneath us. I only saw her for a few seconds. She didn't turn around, she didn't stop murmuring, but she slightly raised her head as if she knew someone was there. She didn't turn, she didn't make any movement, nothing. But I clearly felt that she knew I was watching her. That night was terrible, even when I tried to sleep to forget what I had seen, but then it got even worse. The next day, the neighbor showed up at my door. She didn't knock hard, just 2 little taps. When I opened the door, she had a breadbasket. She smiled at me, but it wasn't a normal smile, it was a fake smile, like she had been practicing it. She said to me, "So you can rest. Sometimes you need silence and a calm mind." He told me that just like that, and I just thanked him because I didn't know what else to do. That same night, the noises began. At first, I thought it was the house because it was old, but it wasn't the wood creaking. They were footsteps. Footsteps that sounded barefoot, slow, right behind the wall we shared. I also heard quiet giggles, as if there were children playing on the other side. But she lived there. That much I knew. And then the smell started. In my room, suddenly, in the middle of the night, that same stable smell would come in. And it's not a metaphor, it was a real smell. I would wake up and feel as if there was damp earth under the bed, dirt, as if there was the breathing of animals inside the closet. I looked for it, checked, moved furniture, nothing. The first time I saw her, the other woman, I thought I was dreaming. It was just after 3 in the morning. I was lying in bed unable to sleep because of the smell when I saw someone walk past my bedroom door. A thin, hunched silhouette, wearing a long nightgown, with very long white hair, almost dragging on the floor. She didn't walk, she didn't come closer, she just passed by and disappeared into the wall of the house. I stood frozen, unsure how to react. I realized that running away wouldn't help me. The next day, I moved the bed again, checked the windows, and looked for any sign that someone could have gotten in. But there was nothing. Everything was tightly closed. The second time I saw her, I couldn't deny it. I couldn't deny that it was something paranormal. I woke up when I heard my name, softly, as if it had been spoken from inside the pillow. I opened my eyes, and there she was standing in the corner of the room, facing me. A very skinny old lady with gray skin, wearing the same nightgown. She wasn't looking at me directly. Her head was tilted to one side, as if she was trying to listen to something inside the wall. And the smell, that damn smell, was so strong, it made my eyes burn. Soon I saw her go into the wall. She just went into it, and I couldn't see her anymore. That same morning, I went to knock on the neighbor's door to ask her if she had any animals, if she had seen anything strange around there. Actually, I was going to ask her anything. I just wanted an excuse to talk to her, to make a good impression or something, so she would leave me alone, so she would see that I wasn't a threat. But she didn't open the door, even though I know she was there, because I heard her breathing right on the other side of the door, and she wasn't breathing normally. She was breathing like she was laughing. She hasn't spoken to me since then, but she shows up by chance whenever I'm outside. She always says things to me that aren't threats, but sound like they are. Did you sleep well? Sometimes people break into these houses. If you hear noises, don't go outside and things like that. The worst part is the old lady still appears. Several times a month, she appears a little closer, no longer at the corner, no longer outside the room. The last few times I've seen her very close. That night, she sat at the foot of my bed in that white nightgown that looks like it wets the floor. She steps on the floor when she moves, even though she leaves no trace, and the smell of the stable lingers longer each time, stronger. Sometimes I feel like I bring it with me when I leave. I don't know what my neighbor is doing or what belongs to her and what is coming into my house because of my fear. But I can't deny that something crosses the fence at night. It's now clear seeing her that night wasn't an accident. And I feel like she knew that something had to jump from her side to mine, and it already did, and I don't know how to get rid of it. Hello, Uriel. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share an experience that greatly impacted me and still makes me question if it truly happened as I recall. This was in 2018 in Alajuela, Costa Rica. It was December 30th. My family usually spends New Year's at my grandfather's farm. That's when we all get together, eat, have fun, and also, well, things have happened there that I could tell you about another time. Some pretty intense and others just plain weird. But it had been years since anything happened, or so we thought. That Sunday the 30th, everyone was playing and dancing in the pavilion with music. My cousins and I were in the plaza playing soccer in the dark. It was around 11:30 or almost midnight, and for us, that was already late. At one point, we decided to play hide and seek. They had already told us many times not to do it at night, that it was bad, that a spirit could come out, or that you could get scared or something could grab your feet, you know. When one of my aunts saw that we wanted to play that, They decided it was better to make a campfire and sleep in tents, so we wouldn't be wandering around in the grass. Around 1 in the morning, we were there roasting marshmallows and grilling some meat, and I asked my parents for permission to use the four-wheeler, or ATV, as they also call it. It was small and already kind of broken, but my dad and I had a trick to start it. I was messing with the carburetor. Sometimes it would start by pushing it too. I took it out of storage and was really happy when I finally started it, since it was usually hard for me. I got on and went up through the farm's plots. At that time, the caretaker kept it in excellent condition. There were plots measured in manzanas and hectares, all filled with grass for the cows. The grass was so tall that, without exaggerating, it could be taller than me in many places. With the ATV's halogen lights, you could see the trees along the road, but other than that, there was no light at all. If you turned off the ATV, you couldn't see a thing. When I was getting to the other pen where they keep the cattle, the ATV suddenly turned off. And yes, it was damaged, but it wasn't normal for it to just turn off like that. Actually, the problem was starting it. Nearby, there were cows lying on the grass, sleeping. I turned on my phone's light to see what was happening, and suddenly, I heard whispers in the grass. Loud whispers and something moving in there. It sounded like... I kept trying to figure out what it was, but I kept trying to connect a small tube that had come loose from the carburetor, the one that carried gasoline to the engine. That's when, by the light of the moon, I saw something in the distance among the biggest trees, some of them 15 or 20 meters tall. Something was jumping from one tree to another, and the trees were moving strangely, as if something heavy was pushing them. That's when I really felt my skin crawl all over. I tried to start the motorcycle again, and right at that moment I heard something coming from where the cows were. A voice. A voice that said, "It's too late for you to be alone." I shone my phone's light toward where I heard it, and I managed to make out eyes shining in the darkness, which seemed to be looking right at me. I looked up toward the barn where the cows eat and saw that the door was slowly opening, and out of the darkness came something black, hunched over, walking slowly. And I swear to you, it was laughing. I heard a very ugly, very strange laugh as this thing came up through the grass. I stood still. I wanted to get a little closer. I don't even know why. But as I did, all the cows suddenly got up and started to move away. Everything that happened up there, from when the motorcycle turned off to what I saw, must have happened in 4 minutes. But for me, it felt like an eternity. Then I heard a horrible scream like a wail. That's when fear really got a hold of me. I pushed the ATV with all my strength to get it started. Normally, it was really hard to start it that way, but I feel like fear gave me strength. When it finally started, I got on and hit the gas with everything I had. And there, I think that's where I made the biggest mistake of my life. I looked back again. And on top of the shelter was that creature, watching me, pointing at me with its finger. On the way, nervous as I was, I ended up breaking one of the halogen lights, but I didn't care at all. I just wanted to get back to where everyone was. I was overwhelmed by fear, panic, anxiety, all kinds of mixed emotions. When I arrived, my dad scolded me because he'd already warned me not to ride the ATV so fast. Seeing the broken halogen headlight made him even angrier. He told me to walk up there with him to find it and fix it the next day. As we were going up, I told him what I had seen. He said he didn't believe me and thought I was making it up. Farther up, when we picked up the flashlight, I told him, "Dad, look over there." At the bottom, a black spot was moving one of the trees. He didn't respond or say anything. He just looked the other way. When we came back down, when we got to the shelter where the family was, my dad didn't say anything to me, but I saw him talk to my mom. When I asked her what he had said, she told me that what I had seen was the La Mona. In Costa Rica, monas are witches who transform into animals to torment or steal children. Or men. Later on, I found out that figure, that thing I saw, wasn't the first time it had appeared on my grandfather's farm. Before I was born, it appeared 3 more times. That woman is looking for something there. That Mona. Something she hasn't been able to find. The last time she appeared was also during a bonfire, with the family gathered telling stories. Thanks for listening, community. On that farm, as I told you, a lot of things happen. And if you want, next time I'll tell you what my uncle told me. Those 3 nights of hell that my grandfather lived through when he bought that land. This story really happened. I promise you that unfortunately, it really did happen. Thank you for staying with us. Remember, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed yet, there's no reason not to become part of the Relatos de la Noche community. Subscribe and become part of this family. Now, if you want to help us even more, leave us a comment and a thumbs up if you enjoyed the episode. Give us a 5-star rating if you're listening on Spotify. Wherever you listen, give us a good rating and interact with us. That helps us a lot to keep working on this project. Let's continue. Hi Uriel, I'm Sophia, a follower of yours since you started on YouTube. I grew up hearing your stories, and now it's finally my turn to share mine. I hope you can read it. I'd like to know what people think. Greetings from Colombia. I'm from a small town that hardly anyone knows about. My grandmother Lala was a witch, even though my family doesn't like to talk about it. She died before I was born, but I grew up listening to my dad's stories. She read cards, cigarettes, and performed rituals. My grandmother Lala did many things like that. My story begins in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. I had just broken up with my partner, and then I found out I was pregnant. At that time, I lived in Spain and he was in the United States. He stayed there for quite a while until he was able to travel. Even so, we kept living apart until my son was born. My son, who is now 5 years old. I don't consider myself a witch, but I do practice witchcraft and Santeria. I do readings and rituals for people close to me. What I want to tell you is what happened during my pregnancy in the first 3 years of my son's life. In Spain, we went to live in a cabin far from everything, about 40 minutes from the town. We stayed there until my son was 3. A lot of things happened in that house. I don't want to believe some of them, but I know what I saw. First, I'll tell you how I learned about the pregnancy. I was living alone in Mallorca, and one day out of nowhere, white worms started to appear. The tiny ones in the trash. I knew right away that this was some kind of spell, because there was no way they could have just appeared overnight. I didn't have any trash in the house, and yet the maggots were crawling up the walls. I did a deep cleaning and a reversal ritual. During that ritual, I saw shadows. I heard voices. Everything felt like being in a horror movie. But interestingly, I wasn't afraid there. I recited powerful prayers in Latin until the candles went out by themselves. Afterward, a silence left my ears ringing. I felt nauseous and ended up vomiting until I passed out. My mom came to see me 3 days later. According to her, I looked dead, pale, thin, unconscious. She took me to the doctor, where I learned I was pregnant. I was in college and I felt like my world was falling apart. In the following days, I dreamed a lot about death. I saw her sitting while I was in something like a pool, holding a baby. And it was always the same. I realized the baby had drowned, and then I woke up. Always a little after 3 in the morning. I kept working, doing readings for the people at the university, and the occasional ritual as well. I felt the baby moving all the time, like he was restless. At around 8 months pregnant, my partner was finally able to move in with me. And that's when things really started to get tough. I started having recurring dreams about a woman. Black, wet hair, like she'd just emerged from the water. Skinny, almost skin and bones. She was carrying my baby and I was lying on the floor, feeling like it was mine. And it was always the same thing. She would drop him and let him go with a horrible scream. My partner would wake up with scratches, bites, and scrapes. Things we couldn't explain. I chose to reach out to my spiritual teacher. She said something was attached to me. Someone had been working on me for a long time. A cemetery spell. He explained what to do and helped me clean the apartment. And yes, everything calmed down a bit. We left that place as soon as we could. We moved to a cabin 40 minutes away from town, like I told you. I thought we'd finally be at peace there. I wanted to believe that by leaving Majorca, I was also leaving behind the worms, the voices, that witchcraft. But that was naive of me. My son was born. He was beautiful. But from the very first day, I noticed that darkness hadn't gone away. It just changed its target. Shortly after we moved in, while my partner was in town buying things, I cleaned the house for the first time. The cabin was old, with dampness and old wood, a smell that sticks to you. I began burning rue and rosemary. Right away, I saw the smoke wasn't rising as usual. Instead of dissipating, it went straight in one direction. The master bedroom where the baby's crib was. I went in. The room was cold, as if there was no heating. The smoke swirled right above the crib, forming a tall, vague figure. Suddenly, I heard a metallic noise under the crib. I bent down and found it stuck to the lower part of the wood. An old rusty copper coin. It wasn't a euro coin. It had dry soil and what appeared to be black wax. It wasn't superstition that scared me. It was the confirmation that someone had put a cemetery binding spell right under my baby's crib. From that night, his sleep changed. He didn't cry normally. He screamed in panic, as if he were waking up from a grown person's nightmare, always between midnight and 3 in the morning. The worst part was before the scream. I could feel it when that thing came into the room. I couldn't see it, but the silence was so deep it made my ears hurt. I would go to the crib and my baby would be awake but wouldn't look at me. His big eyes were fixed on a dark corner of the ceiling, and he had a fear no baby should have. He would start to sob as if his soul hurt. One early morning, I finally had had enough. I turned on the flashlight and followed his gaze. The light reached the corner he watched. There was nothing, just wood. But in the middle of the corner, the wood looked damp, as if something wet had leaned there. I remembered the woman with wet hair from my dreams. My partner tried to be rational, but it was hard when he kept waking up with those marks and I had to treat them. One morning, while he was with the boy, I went to my ritual table. On top of my Santeria book, there was a braid of dry hair tied with a black thread. When I unrolled it, the smell of unburned tobacco filled the room. The same smell I had sensed during my pregnancy ritual. The same one my dad talked about when he mentioned Lala. I didn't want to believe it was my grandmother. She died the same year I was born. I never had any contact with her, but that braid, the tobacco, it felt like a warning and not a nice one. It was a desperate warning. The attacks started to become more direct. My son was just over a year old when the entity began to manifest in a way that my partner could no longer deny. Every night between 1 and 3, a very clear sound could be heard in the hallway. Something small dragging a metal object across the floor, like when you drop a toy and drag it with your finger. The sound always stopped right in front of the baby's room door. And before it stopped, you could hear it, a dry little laugh, very, very far away, and nails as if they were scratching something. One night, when the sound reached the door and a little laugh echoed behind it, my partner switched on the light and opened it suddenly. There was no one there. The hallway was empty. But right on the threshold, there was a row of small circles of ash, as if drawn, and in the middle a piece of the boy's wooden puzzle. It was the face of an animal. The next day he confessed to me, trembling, that when he opened the door, he felt something damp, something cold hit him in the face, as if he had bumped into something that was right there in front of the door. I wanted to handle things myself. The coin, the braid, the marks, everything pointed to the same thing. I prepared a powerful ritual, a very powerful one. A protection ritual, but a very aggressive one. I used a purified cow bone. I carved the entity's name and my son's name on it. The idea was to bury that ritual. While making the offering, the candle flame rose too high and the black smoke didn't rise. It went toward the living room. A few minutes later, I heard my son scream, not from the crib, but from the living room. I ran. He was on the carpet, crawling, but with a terrified expression, staring at the window. And then in the reflection of the glass, I saw the silhouette of the wet woman, the same one from my dreams behind me. This time, I managed to see her hands moving something that hung from a thread. I turned around, but no one was there. But my son kept pointing at one spot and saying, in a voice very different from his own, "Ma." Where he pointed, there was another puzzle piece. This one showed the face of a black goat. That's when I realized the entity would stay. It wasn't just in the cabin. It was playing with my son. The night we finally decided to run away, we packed what we needed. I performed one last simple ritual so we could leave. My partner loaded the suitcases into the car while I got my son from the crib. The room was completely dark, but there was a cold light inside the crib. My baby was awake, calm, with a smile that didn't seem to be his. And he was looking at the corner. I picked him up. His skin was cold and a little damp. And when I touched his lower back, I felt a small round scar, about the size of the coin I had found earlier. It was amazing, a new mark. We got out of there without looking back. We left things behind, furniture, everything. We just wanted to save our son. We went back to Colombia. I thought crossing the ocean would end everything. My son was healthy growing up, but always a bit unusual. He played by burying dolls and digging them up so they could talk to him. The scar never disappeared. A few months ago, while I was cleaning, I felt that strange, murky atmosphere again. And the next day when I checked my arm, I saw a dark spot on my skin. Rough like dry soil in the shape of a capital letter L. The signature of the wing. Or a mark to counteract the other. I still don't know. Sometimes I see my son talking to himself in the garden. I walk over and ask who he's talking to. He lifts his head. He smiles just like that night in the crib and says, "With the wet lady." The cabin is behind us, but the entity from the cemetery and the witch Lala, whom I never met, are still here, fighting for something that's attached to my son's blood. And I know perfectly well, Uriel, that maybe this sounds like a very fantastical story. I'd think the same if I weren't experiencing it myself. And I know that until I find the root of this story, it will never have an ending. Hello, Uriel. I'm Daneri Hernandez. I'm writing to you for the first time, and I'd be happy if you read this, even if it isn't published. I'm from Guatemala, but what I'll share didn't happen there. Before I begin, I want to thank you. I've been listening to you since 2021, and I still remember the first story I heard, La Casa de la Bruja. From then on, I caught up and ended up listening to you almost 24 hours a day. Your stories, and you have been with me on days when I felt very lonely. But anyway, this story begins on October 31st, 2022. That year, I was graduating from 9th grade, and instead of throwing me a party, my parents gave me a trip to the United States, which was my first trip to that country. I recall going to bed early on the 30th listening to Relatos de la Noche, since I always sleep with headphones. But the phone I used back then didn't allow me to use wired headphones while it was charging, because it only had one port for everything, and I had wired headphones. That's why, when I woke up on the 31st, it didn't seem strange to me to hear noises in my headphones. I was sleepy and excited about the trip, so I forgot about that detail. I put them on to see if it was one of your stories because it sounded like you narrating. But when I put them on, I only heard something that sounded like you speaking, in a language that was definitely not Spanish or English. It was a completely unknown language to me.
It's a little bit of yes from I believe. He listened, his metallic spirit stretches.
When I removed the phone from under the pillow, the headphone noise stopped. That's when I realized that the phone was charging, that the headphones weren't connected. I didn't focus on it since I had an upcoming trip. I arrived in the United States that same day on Halloween. My sister and I love Halloween, and in Salem, Massachusetts, even more because they really celebrate it. My sister lived near there at that time, so that day we went to Salem to celebrate. And when we got back, I fell asleep on a couch. And that's where it all started. That night, I started having a very specific dream. A woman dressed in black who came to knock on the window where I was sleeping. And it happened many times during my stay. She was a woman dressed completely in black from head to toe. I never saw her face, but for some reason, I knew she was a woman. Night after night, it was the same. My trip ended and I returned to Guatemala. I went on with my life. In 2024, I graduated from high school, and my parents gave me another trip to the United States to visit my sister. By then, she had already moved to a new house, and now she lived even closer to Salem. And once again, I was there for Halloween. We dressed up and had fun as always. But as the days went by, I started dreaming about the same woman again. The difference was that now I dreamed of her on the street, the one that led to the entrance of my sister's apartment. And every time I dreamed of her, I started to see her face more and more. At first, the image was blurry, but as days went by, I could see her more clearly. Until one day I saw her clearly, completely. To help you understand better, the apartment had 3 doors, a back door that led straight to the kitchen and 2 more in the front. The first opened to the street, and the second led into the apartment. Between those 2 doors was another space housing the upstairs resident's storage room. Now that that's clear, I'll get back to the story. One day we were walking back to the apartment. I was looking at the ground when I heard a woman's voice whispering in my ear. "Lift your head and look at me. Look me in the face. Look at me, look at me." I did it without thinking. And there it was. The woman I had been dreaming about since 2022. She was walking straight toward us. I was completely paralyzed. I asked my sister who she was, and she told me that she did know her. She was the daughter of the people upstairs, but she rarely saw her. I didn't say anything to my sister, and it's important to mention that the first dreams, the ones from 2022, only my mom knew about. We never told anyone about them. That night it was really hard for me to fall asleep, but when I finally did, I dreamed about her again. This time I could see her face very clearly. In the dream, she moved toward the first door leading to the street, and then she walked toward the second one at the entrance to the apartment. She started knocking on the door, and even though her mouth wasn't moving, I knew it was her voice telling me to open it, to let her in. That dream repeated every day. Every time I had that dream, I would get up and check the door. I'd open it to check if anyone was in the space between the 3 doors. Sometimes I would even check if they were locked, and they were always closed. The front door, the storage room door, and the apartment door. Eventually, I stopped dreaming of her at those doors, and she started appearing at the kitchen door. Each time she became more insistent about coming in. And even though her mouth never moved, her voice sounded louder and louder in my head, like it was distorted. I don't know how to explain it, but I could hear it inside me. In the end, nothing else happened. I went back to Guatemala. My sister moved to a new house again. My dad just got back from visiting her, and lately my mom and I have been talking about going too. And even before my dad came back, since we started talking about that trip, I started dreaming about that woman again. Now her face is covered, and she appears on a street I don't recognize. Still. Although from what I've told my dad, maybe it's very close to where my sister lives now. Maybe it's the power of suggestion, or maybe there's an explanation, but I swear to you everyone, this has been happening to me since 2022. I don't know how to explain that I dreamed about someone years before meeting her, or everything that has happened around those dreams. I don't know if you'll believe me, but I promise you it's true. If I travel again and something similar happens, I'll write to you to tell you how everything goes. I want to say goodbye by sending a big greeting to my sister, who also listens to Relatos de la Noche sometimes, and who also gave me my first book of yours for Christmas. I loved it. Even though I'm not much of a reader, I read that one in a single night. Thank you, Uriel, and thank you, community, for all the affection. I don't know if this story will ever get published, but yes, thank you for listening to me. And have a very good night.